It started with a single jawbone buried in the depths of a remote cave in Siberia. At first glance, it looked human, but the DNA told a different story, one that didn't match anything in our genetic library. Not Neanderthal, not Homo sapiens, not anything we've seen before. What they found rewrote the story of our species. A forgotten lineage, a ghost species, and the chilling part, it may not be extinct, not completely. This is the real, unfiltered mystery of the unknown human, and what it reveals about the hidden branches of our evolution, our origins, and the species that once walked beside us, or still might. The bone that broke the family tree, the cave that time forgot. It was 2010 when a small team of archaeologists descended into the freezing darkness of Denisova Cave, a remote wind-bitten hollow nestled in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. They weren't expecting much, just another routine excavation in a landscape littered with the ghosts of the Ice Age. But deep in the earth, among ancient sediments layered like the pages of time, they found something that didn't make sense. A single fragment of a finger bone, roughly 41,000 years old. At first, it seemed ordinary. Another scrap from the long-dead Neanderthals, or perhaps an early modern human. The team labeled it, bagged it, and moved on. But when they sent it for DNA analysis, the results didn't align with anything in the known human evolutionary chart. Not Neanderthal, not Homo sapiens, and not a mutation of either. This bone belonged to someone else entirely. A new kind of human, one we never knew existed. The revelation exploded through the scientific world like a thunderclap. This wasn't just another fossil. This was a rewrite of our family tree, and it was just the beginning. The species was quickly named Denisovans, after the cave they were discovered in, but the name was just a placeholder for something much deeper, a ghost branch of humanity that had been hiding in plain sight. Erased by time, unknown to history, and completely absent from the textbooks we'd all been taught. This wasn't some fringe theory or shaky speculation. The evidence was ironclad. The DNA extracted from the bone was distinct from both Neanderthals and modern humans, meaning we were looking at a third human species living alongside us in Eurasia at the same time. That shattered everything we thought we knew. For years, the dominant view of human evolution painted a relatively simple picture, one straight line of progress. From apes to Homo habilis to Homo erectus, to us, Homo sapiens. Neanderthals were the only other recognized side branch, and even they were believed to have been outcompeted and wiped out by us. But now, a third branch had emerged, a lost cousin, one that shared the earth with us, and perhaps even shared blood with us. And the truly haunting part, we don't know what they looked like. We don't know how they spoke, what tools they used, or what they believed. We don't even know how many of them there were. All we had was a finger bone, a sliver of tooth, a whisper of their genome. But that whisper was loud enough to change history. The species without a face. How do you reconstruct the identity of an entire species from a few bones? That's the maddening mystery of the Denisovans. Unlike Neanderthals, who left behind skulls, tools, burial sites, and even cave paintings, the Denisovans are like smoke, present in the data, but invisible to the naked eye. No full skeleton has ever been found. No facial reconstruction, no direct artifacts tied to their culture, just fragments. And yet, from those fragments, something incredible emerged, a complete genetic blueprint. Thanks to advances in paleontology, scientists were able to extract high-quality DNA from the Denisovan finger bone. That genome didn't just say, "We existed." It screamed it, loud and clear. This was a distinct species of archaic human, closer to Neanderthals than to us. Yes, but still genetically unique. And more importantly, they interbred with us. Let that sink in. This isn't ancient history anymore. This is personal. When geneticists began comparing modern human DNA to the Denisovan genome, something shocking happened. They found traces of Denisovan DNA in millions of people alive today, especially in populations from Southeast Asia, Melanesia, and parts of Oceania. In fact, some groups carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA in their genetic makeup, which means that at some point, our ancestors and theirs met. They didn't just compete for land. They didn't just fight, they loved, they mated, they merged. And that love left a permanent genetic fingerprint still carried in our cells. This wasn't a one-off encounter. This was sustained interaction between two species, separated by perhaps hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, but close enough to have children. What does that say about the walls we put up between us and them? What does it say about what it means to be human? Scientists call it introgression, the transfer of genes from one species into the gene pool of another. It's a technical term, but what it really means is this. We're not who we thought we were. Modern humans are not pure Homo sapiens. We're hybrids, a biological mosaic made up of ancient wanderers, survivors, and ghosts. We carry memories in our blood, of species lost, of worlds forgotten, of branches on the tree that were snapped off before they ever had a chance to flourish. And now, one of those branches, Denisova, was reaching out through time, grabbing us by the collar and forcing us to look deeper. Echoes beneath our skin. So here we are, modern humans carrying the invisible fingerprints of a species we've never seen, never named, and until recently, never even knew existed. But what did we get from them? Denisovan DNA isn't just some evolutionary relic sitting quietly in the background. It's doing something inside us. Scientists have discovered that the genes inherited from Denisovans may have helped our ancestors adapt to extreme environments, including high-altitude living. Take the Tibetan Plateau, one of the harshest, highest environments on Earth. Oxygen is scarce, the air is thin, but the people who've lived there for generations aren't just surviving, they re-thriving. And when geneticists examined the DNA of modern Tibetans, they found something wild. A gene variant called EPase1, which helps the body function efficiently in low-oxygen conditions. That gene didn't evolve in Homo sapiens. It didn't come from Neanderthals. It came from Denis. In other words, part of what makes Tibetan endurance possible didn't originate with us. It was borrowed from a cousin species we only recently discovered, a gift from a forgotten genome. And that's just one example. Other Denisovan DNA segments are linked to immune system responses, metabolism, and even traits like fat storage. Adaptations that may have helped early humans survive the frigid tundras, the viral gauntlets, and the nutritional chaos of prehistoric Earth, which forces us to ask, how much of our strength isn't even ours? We often imagine evolution as a ladder, step by step toward progress, toward us, but maybe it's not a ladder at all. Maybe it's a web full of entanglements, crossbreeding, genetic gifts, and accidents, twists and branches. Maybe being human was never a clear destination, just a lucky intersection of overlapping species, each leaving their mark. Think about it. Right now, billions of people on Earth are walking around with Denisovan genes in their cells with no idea. They're recarrying the legacy of a shadow species, one that vanished without a name, without a monument, without a trace. We lost their language. We lost their stories. But their blood still pulses inside us. What does it mean to inherit the silence of an entire people? What does it say about how many more are still waiting to be found, beneath the earth, inside our genes, or in the caves we haven't yet dared to dig? This was no ordinary discovery. This was the bone that broke the family tree and revealed the forest underneath. The genetic shadows we all carry. Look in the mirror and you'll see one face, one species, Homo sapiens. But zoom in way in down to the DNA inside your cells, and something strange appears. You'll find markers, variants, sequences that don't trace back to anything we've ever mapped. They don't belong to us. They don't belong to Neanderthals. They don't belong to Denisovans. They belong to someone else. A hominin we haven't discovered yet. A ghost species. This isn't science fiction. It's genomic fact. When researchers sequence modern human genomes, especially those from Africa and Southeast Asia, they consistently find anomalies. Segments of DNA that clearly come from an ancient lineage but have no known fossil record, no name, and no face to match. In the scientific world, this is called archaic introgression without reference, in other words. We have the DNA, but no bones. And that means this: we've inherited genes from species we've never seen, never identified, never classified. They were real. They walked the earth. They had children with our ancestors. But somewhere along the evolutionary path, they vanished, leaving only fragments behind, ghosts in the blood, whispers in the genome, clues from a forgotten chapter of human history that was never written down, and the mystery deepens. A 2020 study on West African populations revealed that up to 19% of their DNA may come from an unknown hominin, not Neanderthal, not Denisovan, and definitely not modern human. That's nearly a fifth of their genome. Let that land. Entire civilizations today are walking around with massive chunks of their ancestry tied to a species we haven't even named yet. We don't know what they looked like. We don't know what tools they used. We don't know how they vanished. But we know they were here, and we know they're still inside us. It's almost terrifying, isn't it? To realize that our history is incomplete, that there are entire peoples missing from the human story, species that mattered, species that contributed to who we are. Yet we've buried them not just under rock and time, but under the illusion that we were the only ones who mattered. The genome says otherwise. And the genome never lies. DNA time capsules and evolution's black box. Imagine a time capsule buried in your chest. A relic sealed, not in stone or iron but in chromosomes. Every cell in your body holds the entire story of your ancestors. But parts of that story? They're written in a language we still can't fully translate. That's what these mysterious DNA segments are. Fragments of forgotten species, passed down through hundreds of generations like messages in a bottle, drifting across oceans of time. They didn't just survive extinction, they cheated it by fusing their story with ours. And the more we study our own genes, the more we realize the family tree of humanity isn't a clean diagram with clear branches. It's a wild, tangled thicket with lineages crossing, recombining, diverging, and disappearing without leaving a single skull behind. Some of these ghost populations show up only in genetic analysis. We find them not because we dug them out of the ground, but because they left scars in our sequence. Little anomalies, deviations, code that doesn't match what we'd expect. Scientists call these patterns deep lineage signals, indicators that ancient hominins who are not us were in the mix. mating, migrating, dying, but also leaving genetic fingerprints that are still affecting us now. And these aren't just dormant fossils inside our genome. Some of these archaic genes are switched on. They influence our immune response, our physical traits, even our susceptibility to certain diseases. One ancient variant might help you fight a virus. Another might make you more prone to diabetes. Another could influence how your brain processes fear or memory. So who were these genetic ghosts? We don't know yet. They may have been African hominin species that never left the continent, never fossilized in places we've excavated, and never made it into textbooks. But their legacy, it lives in millions of people across the world. In your skin, your lungs, your bones, your brain. You carry the DNA of people you've never heard of. People the world forgot, but your body didn't, and that changes everything. Because evolution is no longer a straight path from primitive to advanced. It's no longer a clean story of one species rising to dominance. It's a mosaic, a haunted archive, a memory vault full of non-human human ancestors who helped sculpt the bodies we now live in. We are not Homo sapiens in isolation. We are a collage of the entire human saga, including the parts that were lost, buried, or never even discovered. We are the legacy of the lost. Picture this. You walk down the street, glance at the people around you, faces lit by phones, voices carried by wind, and never once do you think I'm surrounded by ancient bloodlines. But you are. We all are. You're not just descended from Homo sapiens. You're descended from survivors of ice ages, volcanic winters, mass migrations, and species whose names we may never learn. You are the final product of 1,000 near extinctions, and the deeper we dig into the human genome, the clearer it becomes. We didn't conquer the world alone. We were shaped by the ones who didn't make it. We carried their DNA like eulogies wrapped in skin. In Papua New Guinea, for instance, studies suggest that modern humans interbred not just with one but multiple distinct Denisovan groups, each leaving a slightly different genetic trace. That's not just incredible, that's unprecedented. It suggests that multiple Denisovan populations evolved separately, in different regions, and yet all found a way to merge with us. How many branches are we missing? How many species don't fossilize well, or lived in regions where heat, soil, or erosion erased their physical evidence? What if entire species of human ancestors are lost forever, except in our blood? It's as if our genome is a museum of ancient humanity, but most of the exhibits are unlabeled. The bones are missing, the names are unknown, but the traces remain. Some researchers now argue that we've only scratched the surface, that many more ghost populations remain hidden in the genome, waiting to be uncovered through statistical modeling, AI-assisted genome comparison, and deeper sampling from underrepresented populations. In other words, the story of us is still unfolding. The further we look into our genes, the more crowded our ancestry becomes. We were never alone. We are never alone. And that brings us to a difficult truth. Evolution wasn't fair. It wasn't kind. Entire species, smart, strong, social, vanished, and we don't know why. Maybe it was climate. Maybe it was conflict. Maybe we wiped them out, but we absorbed them. We took their strength, their secrets, their resilience, and made them part of our legacy. You're not just you. You're every ancestor who survived long enough to leave something behind, and some of those ancestors weren't human the way we define it today. But maybe it's time to change the definition. When species collide, love, war, and survival, the first contact wasn't peaceful. Imagine a world that feels almost alien, forests thicker than memory, ice crawling down from the north, and the earth still raw, trembling from its last volcanic breath. In this landscape, our ancestors weren't alone. They were not the rulers. They were not the apex predators. They were just one of many human species walking the same dirt, drinking from the same rivers, and staring up at the same stars. So what happened? When they met each other, the romantic version is simple. Two species, genetically close enough to interbreed, cross paths in the wild, and instinct leads to curiosity, then attraction. But the real version, it was far more complicated, Dan, far more human. When Homo sapiens began expanding out of Africa around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, they didn't enter an empty world. They entered one already inhabited by Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and likely other archaic humans we still haven't named. To these groups, we were the strangers. We were the ones with strange tools, new behaviors, and an unfamiliar scent. Some encounters probably ended in violence, raids, fights, deaths. Survival was brutal, and food was scarce. And any new tribe was a threat, but not all of it was war. Because buried deep in the genetics of modern humans is something indisputable. We didn't just fight them, we had children with them. The fossil record tells part of the story, but the genome, it tells the rest. Almost everyone outside of Africa today carries 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, and some populations like Melanesians and Aboriginal Australians carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That means multiple interbreeding events occurred, in different places, at different times, and not just once and done, but sustained, intimate contact. Generations of it, love, or something like it. But here's where it gets even deeper. Some of those interbreeding events weren't neutral. Some weren't even consensual. And some may have been strategic, because if you were entering a harsh, unfamiliar environment, the best way to survive might have been to merge with the locals, to take their strengths, their immunity, their adaptations, and pass those on to your children. That's not just biology, that's evolutionary war strategy. Mating with the enemy, let's strip away the romanticism. Interbreeding between species wasn't a candlelit affair. It was likely chaotic, uncertain, and driven by raw instincts, desire, fear, dominance, and survival. Two different species, meeting in the wilderness, without shared language or culture, yet they understood each other enough to mate. Let that sit for a moment, because biologically, that means we were close. Close enough in brain function, in anatomy, in emotion. Close enough that the lines between us and them blurred in the dark. But why did we interbreed? Why not wipe them out completely, as the old narrative suggests? Because the truth is, we needed each other. When Homo sapiens entered new environments, from the snow-choked steppes of Eurasia to the brutal highlands of Asia, we were vulnerable. We didn't know the diseases, the predators, the terrain, but they did. Neanderthals had been living in Europe for 300,000 years. Denisovans had already adapted to mountains, microbes, and seasons we couldn't handle. So interbreeding wasn't just an accident, it was adaptive. It gave our children an edge. Scientists have since uncovered Denisovan genes that help modern Tibetans survive at extreme altitudes. Neanderthal genes influence skin pigmentation, immune response, even metabolism. In other words, when we mated with them, we didn't just take their bodies, we took their survival tools. Those tools stayed with us. They are with us now. But there's a darker side. Because not every interbreeding was successful. Many hybrid children likely died early, unable to survive the genetic mismatch. And some combinations were selectively deleted over time, our genomes, actively purging incompatibilities. That's evolution's brutal honesty. It experiments, it fails, it tries again. Only what works survives, and some of what worked are pieces of them, inside us, forever. Neanderthals and Denisovans may be extinct in body, but not in influence, not in blood. They walk beside us still in every breath we take, in every heartbeat we never earned alone. The last of their kind, and ours, eventually. The world changed, the ice retreated, the forests shifted, and something irreversible happened. We stayed. They didn't. Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago. Denisovans, even earlier. Their exact timeline still a mystery, other hominin groups never even found. But we Homo sapiens, we expanded. We spread to every corner of the planet, and somewhere along the way, the other humans vanished. So what happened? Did we outcompete them? Kill them? Replace them? The truth is, we may never know. It could have been war, or climate, or numbers, or disease. Or maybe, just maybe, it wasn't one thing. Maybe it was a slow erosion of their world, one generation at a time, until their children looked more like us than them, until their culture faded beneath ours, until their names were no longer spoken even by their own. But they didn't vanish without a trace. They became us. Not completely, not entirely, but enough to matter. In every genome on Earth, pieces of them remain. A nose shape, a skin tone, an immune trait, a forgotten reaction to altitude, or hunger, or fear. We are walking museums of ancient love and loss. We are the product of not just survival but collision. Collisions of blood, of culture, of instincts, of worlds. And here's the haunting beauty. You might be carrying DNA from the last Neanderthal to ever live, or from a Denisovan whose bones have never been found. You might be the echo of a child born between two species, neither of which exists anymore. We think of extinction as disappearance, but sometimes, extinction looks like absorption. Sometimes, the last breath of a species is taken inside the lungs of the one who survives, and sometimes, survival doesn't mean domination. It means remembering. The others who walked beside USS Island of Lost Humans? In 2003, on the remote Indonesian island of Flores, a team of archaeologists made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific world. They found a skull, small, fragile, almost childlike, but it belonged to an adulta, fully grown female, just over 3 feet tall. At first they thought it was a pathological modern human, perhaps someone with a growth disorder. But when they looked closer, the truth hit harder. This was another species of human, one we never expected, one that shouldn't have existed at all. They called her Homo floresiensis. The press gave her a nickname, the Hobbit. But this was no fairy tale. These tiny humans lived on the island of Flores, until as recently as 50,000 years ago, at the same time that Homo sapiens were sweeping across Southeast Asia. They hunted dwarf elephants. They crafted stone tools. They lit fires. They may have even spoken a language. And yet, for all their achievements, they left behind almost nothing. No grand civilization, no towering monuments, just a few bones, a few clues, and a million questions. How did they get to the island? Did they evolve there from earlier hominins who shrank over time? Or did they arrive already small, another branch entirely? More importantly, did we meet them? Did early Homo sapiens encounter these tiny humans on this quiet island surrounded by sea and time? And if so, what happened next? The pattern is hauntingly familiar. A forgotten species, living alongside us, erased almost entirely except for a cave, a skull, and a name carved into textbooks. But Flores was just the beginning, because around the same time, in the depths of a South African cave, another species was being unearthed. This time, the species didn't look tiny or fragile. This one looked primitive, almost too primitive to still exist, and yet, it did. Into the darkness, the Homo naledi mystery in 2013. Deep inside the Rising Star cave system in South Africa, a team of cavers and scientists descended into a chamber, so narrow it could only be reached by the smallest members of the expedition. What they found defied every expectation: dozens of bones. From at least 15 individuals, some adults, some children, a previously unknown species of human. They called it Homo naledi, and the shock wasn't just that they existed, it was when they existed. Homo naledi had curved fingers, small brains, and ape-like shoulders, traits you'd expect from a species 2 million years old. But then came the bombshell. Dating revealed they had lived just 250,000 years ago. That means Homo naledi wasn't some ancient fossil from the distant past. They were around when Homo sapiens were already evolving. They were our contemporaries, not ancestors, not relics, neighbors. What's even more astonishing is where their bones were found. Deep in a pitch-black chamber, with no sign of predators, floods, or natural disasters. The only plausible explanation: they were deliberately placed there, buried by other Homo naledi. Which leads to a question no one expected: were they burying their dead? And if so, what does that mean? Until recently, we believed that only Homo sapiens, maybe Neanderthals, had the cognitive ability for ritual behavior like burial, but Homo naledi had tiny brains, roughly 1/3 the size of ours. And yet, they may have understood death. They may have had grief, memory, symbolism. They may have felt what we feel, and acted on it. How many more species like this once walked the earth? Not as primitive beasts, but as beings, with culture, with emotion, with something we thought was uniquely human. They didn't write books, but maybe they remembered names. They didn't build cities, but maybe they mourned, and then they vanished. Still out there? The humans we haven't found. The more we uncover, the less we know. We once believed Homo sapiens stood alone. Now we know we shared the planet with at least half a dozen other human species: Denisovans, Neanderthals, Homo floresiensis, Homo naledi, and more still unnamed. But the silence between those names may be louder than we think, because there are whispers, clues, anomalies, stories that suggest the list isn't complete. Some of those clues come from DNA. As we saw earlier, scientists have detected genetic fingerprints of unknown ancestors in modern human populations, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and the Pacific. We have the DNA, we don't have the bones. Which means this: there are entire species missing from the fossil record, species that interbred with us, that influenced our biology, that shaped our world. They lived, they died, and we haven't even given them a name. Some clues come from oral traditions, stories passed down for thousands of years by indigenous peoples, legends of little people who lived in the forests, of ancient beings who came before the tribes, who could speak, who stole fire, who vanished. To science, these are myths. To history, they might be memories. And then there are the sightings. Strange footprints in jungles, unusual remains in remote caves, unclassified bones locked in museum basements, dismissed for decades because they didn't fit the story. But now, the story is cracking open. What if some of these ancient humans survived longer than we thought? What if one or two still do? The Andaman Islands, the dense highlands of Papua New Guinea, the deep interiors of the Congo Basin, places still largely unexplored, places where cameras fail and legends breathe. This isn't to suggest there's a tribe of Neanderthals living in the jungle, but the truth is, we don't know what we haven't found, and we can't declare the story finished just because we're still writing it. We're digging in deserts, we're sequencing bones, we're staring at genomes. But perhaps the real mystery is how little we've scratched the surface. Who else walked beside us? And what would it mean if they never really left? Are we the last humans, or just the latest? The illusion of being alone. Look around, scroll your feed, stare into the mirror, walk through any city. It feels like we are the pinnacle, the final form, the ultimate result of evolution. But what if that's an illusion? What if Homo sapiens are not the end of the story, but just the latest chapter? It's easy to feel alone at the top. Our species dominates the globe. We've reshaped continents, rewired ecosystems, and even launched machines beyond Earth. There are no Neanderthals watching the skies, no Denisovans building civilizations, no hobbits carving stories into stone. We are the last human species as far as we know, but that doesn't mean we were meant to be. Think of it this way: for most of human history, we weren't alone. For over 90% of our existence, Homo sapiens shared the Earth with other humans. Other intelligent, walking, thinking, feeling beings who looked like us, but weren't us. They had their own origins, their own minds, their own fates. And then suddenly only we remained. Not because we were kinder, not because we were wiser, not even because we were stronger, but maybe because we were luckier. That should humble us. Because if they could vanish entire species with culture, memory, language, families, then so could we. We are not evolution's final word. We're a pause, a comma, not the period. The story of humanity might not be over. It might just be between chapters. What we inherited, what we lost, we inherited the world. But we didn't inherit everything that once lived within it. We carry the DNA of ghosts, yes, but we lost their minds. Their songs, their stories, their view of the world. Imagine a Neanderthal child sitting by firelight, listening to their elders tell stories under the stars. We'll never know what those stories were, what they feared, what they dreamed, all of it. Gone, not extinct, erased. We look at their bones and ask what killed them, but we should also ask, what did they know that we never will? What rituals did Denisovans pass down that are now buried under volcanic ash? What cures did Homo floresiensis discover in jungle plants we now bulldoze? What did Homo naledi see when they stared into the night and wondered where the stars came from? We inherited their blood, but not their soul. And that is the deepest extinction of all. So we must face a truth most people never consider. Being the last human species doesn't make us special, it makes us endangered. We are the last link in a long chain of minds that once lit this planet. We're not here because we're superior. We're here because of chance, struggle, violence, adaptation, and, yes, mercy. At some point, someone from another species chose not to kill us. At some point, we chose to love someone not like us. And those moments echo through our blood. Still, it begs a painful question. If we disappear, who will remember us? Who will dig up our bones and wonder what we believed in, what myths we told, what gods we feared, what love we carried? We are a blink in time, a thin layer in Earth's crust. One day, we may be nothing but scattered artifacts and someone else's puzzle. And that should make us pay attention, because extinction isn't just about biology, it's about memory. The weight of the flame, we are the last human species. But we don't carry a trophy, we carry a torch. It burns with memory, with stories we'll never fully understand, with echoes of ancestors who never made it this far, but gave us the strength to try. That torch was passed in silence through death, through interbreeding, through collapse and catastrophe. Neanderthals passed it in their last breath. Denisovans left it buried in our DNA. Homo naledi may have buried their dead with reverence, knowing the light was fading. Now it's in our hands. So the question becomes, what will we do with it? Will we rewrite the record to include the forgotten? Will we recognize that human was never a singular thing, but a chorus? A chorus that once filled the world with different tones, different minds, different ways of seeing the same moon? Or will we repeat the pattern? Erase? Conquer? Forget? If we are the last, then we are also the curators, the protectors of the memory of a dozen human species who didn't survive. And that makes every choice we make, every ecosystem we destroy, every language we let die, every culture we mock or ignore a decision about more than us. It's a decision about whether we learned anything from those we buried in our blood. Because one day, someone may study our fossils. They'll find the tools we made, the structures we built, the trash we left behind. But they'll wonder, did they remember? Did they honor the ones who came before? Or did they pretend to be alone in a world full of memory? We are the latest chapter, but we don't have to be the last. We can evolve not just in body, but in consciousness, in empathy, in memory. We can tell the story fully and keep the flame alive. So now you know, we weren't the only ones. We never were. The world was once full of humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, hobbits, naledi, and others still waiting to be named. They laughed, they hunted, they loved, and though their bones turned to dust, their blood still moves in us. You are not a single species, you are a legacy, a walking, breathing monument to those who came before and vanished without ever being seen. Every step you take is a continuation of a path carved by forgotten feet. Every breath you take is a chance to remember what they gave, not just their genes, but their chance at life, folded into yours. So the next time you look in the mirror, don't just see a modern human, see the shadows behind your eyes, the ones who walked beside mammoths, the ones who lit fires in caves, the ones who buried their dead in the dark, and ask yourself, what story are you adding to the human saga? Will you be the chapter that forgets, or the one that finally remembers? If this story moved you, if it cracked open even a single question about who we are and how many we once were, then stay with us. Subscribe to Echoes of the Hunt, where we bring the lost world of ancient humanity back to life. There are more stories to uncover, more ancestors to remember, more truths buried just beneath our feet. Because the earth is full of echoes, and some are calling your name.